Good afternoon. Welcome to Parent Panel, How to Be an Effective Advocate for Your Child with a Disability, sponsored by Care Design New York. My name is Sita Budrum, and I'm a coordinator of operations at ADAPT Community Network. I oversee several residential homes in the Bronx, as well as the overnight respite program. We provide services to adults and children starting as young as 3 years old and provide services to all 5 boroughs. A couple of housekeeping rules. Please put your questions in for the speakers in the Q&A function. If you're having any technical difficulties, there will be answers to common questions in the chat section. This session is also being recorded, so you can watch it again online at adaptcommunitynetwork.org and follow us on social media at Adapt We Change. It is my pleasure today to welcome you to today's session featuring moderator Winnie Schiff and panelists Michael Bolton, Rima Izquierdo, Diane Perugia, and Edie Weber. Winnie has been the Associate Executive Director for Legislative Affairs at the Interagency Council for Developmental Disabilities Agency since 2008. Prior to that, she worked at AHRC New York City for 21 years as the Director of Marketing and Special Projects, and was instrumental in developing the largest supported employment program for people with developmental disabilities in New York City. Michael received his bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of Hartford in 1974 and entered the IDD field in 1978. Working for UCP of New York State, providing recreation opportunities and residences throughout New York City. He went back to school and received a master's degree in therapeutic recreation and developmental disabilities from LIU in 1981, as well as doing his clinical internship at working at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island. Rima is the District 75 Leadership Team Bronx Parent Representative and Chairperson, Consumer Advisory Council for Rose F. Kennedy Center, Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center, Bronx Developmental Disability Parent Council member. Her career of advocacy, leadership, and charity started at a young age. As a teen, she was appointed the liturgical leader of her local parish, volunteered at nursing homes, taught CCD, and participated in many charity events within her community. Diane is a parent of a child with autism spectrum disorder and chair of Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council. Diane and a group came together to form the Grace Foundation to support and offer services for families affected by autism spectrum disorders. She has chaired national autism conferences, and in 2010 was appointed by former borough president John P. Molinaro, to the New York City Department of Education's panel for education policy. Edie is a mother of a child with autism. She became involved in disability advocacy as a result of challenges faced to access to appropriate services trying to meet the needs of her son. Edie currently serves as the family vice president of the Bronx Developmental Disabilities Council and the parent co-chair of the Children's Family Support Committee. Let's get started. Welcome our panels.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. We'll have about 15 minutes for questions at the end of the presentation, so think about what you want to ask. I am thrilled to be here with these stellar parent advocates who are about to share their secrets for effective advocacy with you. I'll be asking them a few questions and they'll be answering, and then you can ask your own questions at the end. And I thought I should throw in that I also am a parent of 2 kids with IEPs, one who is about to graduate from a District 75 school. So we're all parent advocates together. So I'm going to jump right in and ask my first question, which is, how did you get started as a parent advocate? Who would like to address that one?
I could jump in here, Winnie.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I started advocating for my child when he was about 2 years old. And at that time, autism wasn't as prevalent as it is today. You know, my son is 24, his birthday was yesterday, so he's 24 years old. And at that time, he was, he's one of four, so he was my third child at the time. And at 2 years old, I started noticing very early on that he was not hitting all of his milestones. So I started taking him to the doctor, and my pediatrician really was brushing it off. But as a parent, you know that something isn't right. So I had a really hard time getting him diagnosed initially. I went to the Rose F. Kennedy Center, which was instrumental in helping me get that initial diagnosis only of developmental delays at that time. And I really did everything. I filmed him with my video camera to show some of the issues that I was seeing at home to try and help with the diagnosis. So we started then applying for early intervention services, which again, at the time was very difficult. I live up in the Bronx, and trying to find a provider to come in my home in the Bronx to provide services was very difficult. And actually, I was not able to find someone. It wasn't until he went into the preschool special education system that he actually started receiving services. So it was really from that young age that the advocacy work began.
Thanks, Edie. I want to jump in and just remind everybody, we have so much to talk about, but we have an interpreter that is trying to translate for us. So please speak a little bit more slowly. That's really interesting. Is there anybody else who wants to briefly answer that first question? How did you get started? Anything to add to what Edie said?
Can I jump in for a second? Basically, you know, I got started in 1978 working in the field, and my wife also works in the field, and we have a son now that was born in 1987. So we are parents, and I realized early on in my career that people with disabilities, particularly those like my son who are more intellectually impaired, and a lot of people I work with that are physically impaired, cannot advocate for themselves. So I think it's really, that's been a very important part to realize that not everybody can, and a lot of the services that we're seeking, particularly when our children are young, and obviously cannot advocate for themselves at that age, made me realize that it's important to get involved as soon as possible.
Great, thanks, Michael. Next question is, at what level and with whom do you advocate? And for example, your child's school, the New York City Department of Education, on the city level, the state level, the federal level, or any other level that you would advocate on. Who would like to take that question?
I'll jump in real quick. My son is obviously older now. He's going to be 35 in a couple of weeks. So I won't concentrate on that part, but I do a lot of advocacy on the state level, because in the end, if you have a very young child, then you're going to be dealing with state education. And once your child gets older, or even if you're able to get services when they're younger, you're dealing with assembly members, senators, and they're the ones that make the laws and control the budgets. And so getting involved with your legislators, as you well know, Winnie, is really the bottom line in how you can move things along, because eventually you're going to get involved with OPWDD, Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, and that is a state agency department. So it's very important to do that. I think that's the most important.
Right, Michael, most of the money that supports our programs and services comes from the state, so that makes sense. Would anybody else like to talk about at what levels and with whom do you advocate?
Sure, I can jump in here. I had the opportunity for 7 years to work with the Department of Education. My daughter was never in a Board of Ed school in New York City. I always did private with her. But I was appointed to the PEP panel, and that gave me opportunity to help the disabled, and I really enjoyed doing that work. I thought I could do more, but the little I did, I think did offer help to the disabled. I too agree with Michael. I focus my advocacy on state. I often tell parents all the time, they're mad at our mayor or they're mad at our, borough president. I'm like, state, your kid is going to be over 21 longer than under 21, where the city would take care, through education, would take care of them. So yes, I focus on senators and assemblymen as well, and I urge families to do that as well.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's important to really advocate on every level. And I've been advocating on every level for over 30 years now at this point. I too work in the field, so I work for a provider organization that's really helped me understand what the service system is all about. And what I try to do is really educate families that, there was a time when these services were not available, and we had parents who chose not to put their child in institution and fought for this rich service system that we have today. Unlike education, adult services are not an entitlement. It is, there's nothing more important than you could do for your child but to advocate. And again, that's on every level, from when they're a child all the way up till they're an adult.
So true. And when you were talking about EI earlier, I was thinking that it's hard to get EI in your home again, because we have such a shortage of clinicians and we have such a staff shortage that services are hard to get now again. So the time to advocate certainly is now. The next question is, what are the most important things to remember when advocating? Who would like to take that one?
I'd like to take this one. So one of the biggest important things to remember is don't let them take your power as a parent away. You have the say. You are everything at that team. They cannot proceed without your signature. They cannot proceed without you accepting that we are going to move forward with everything. As an advocate, as an adult, it's the same thing. They cannot make decisions for us. So, nothing about us without us. We really need to take that to heart and really understand what that means. That is our power, and you don't relinquish that to anybody. That is everything. So you are the last word for your child. So what I love to instill in families is don't let anyone tell you what your kid can't do, and you don't accept anything that you don't accept. So you ask questions, you make them explain more, you draw me a picture, take me on a field trip, but you don't say yes until you feel that that is the right decision for your family member, because that is your responsibility, and only you are the one that goes at the end of the day and takes that child home. So don't give up your power.
Amen. Would anybody else like to comment on that question?
I would like to piggyback a little bit on what Rima just said, that you have to realize also that you are, as she said, the last word. So if they stick a piece of paper in front of you and tell you to sign it and you don't agree, don't sign it. I don't mean to be telling people exactly what to do, but it's happened to us. And when you say no, they don't have a choice. They can't move forward either. So that's important. But you also have to look at the bigger picture, and that it's not always just about what's best for your family member or your child, because there's so many other people out there that could benefit. So like, my son is no longer getting education services. He's well past that, but I still advocate on that level, because all the people coming behind, all the young children, need us not to forget, as parents of adult children, where our kids came from. So you really have to advocate on every level, as Edie said, and for every age level, no matter how old your child is.
Good point.
A point I'd like to make, if you don't mind, is that I think we need to remember to stay focused on priorities. In other words, I know, like a lot of the councils, we work with IAC, right, and develop priorities and stick to those priorities. So when we're talking to politicians and Albany, we're direct on what we want. Like, for example, couple of years ago, we did Be Fair to Direct Care. And I think last year or the year before, we did Our Kids or Your Kids. So stay focused on and give one message. I think that's very important. I think it's very effective.
Great.
That's a great point, Diane. And if I could just piggyback on that, it's really, it's power in numbers, right? And you mentioned the councils. So Diane is Staten Island, correct? Council. And the Bronx, there's one developmental disabilities council in every borough. And I really encourage families to get involved. You could get involved locally in the community. It's really important to know your community, what needs of your community, and continue to help, even, as Michael said, all along the way. I have an adult child as well, but I continue to help in EI, in education. It's, again, it's going back to, those parents. Like, we need to continue their legacy and continue to band together and help each other. Even when our child may not need the services at that point and they're secure, we have really, I think, a responsibility to continue to help others. Life is about service.
Well said. So as long as we're talking about that, let's jump to the last question and we'll come back and do the others. What other groups do you guys belong to that you can share with the audience so that they can get connected to? Because you're right, getting information is absolutely essential, and power in numbers so that we're speaking with one voice that's the way to get things done. And we've seen it happen. We've been so successful together. So what other groups do you belong to?
I got to jump in because I forgot to give credit to the two women that started New York City Fair, which is where I've been doing my advocacy since I retired in 2013. Ellie Roofer and Mary Krasn, who started NYC Fair. And for those of you that don't know what it means, it's Family Advocacy Information Resource. We're a bunch of volunteers, parents, but we advocate for the full spectrum of life. And we are also now part of a group called SOS that I know many of you have heard about. So those are the two groups that I'm the most involved with.
Yes,
Save Our Services. SOS, Save Our Services. I know we're throwing around acronyms.
Sorry about that.
And Save Our Services is a coming together of all the DD councils and New York City Fair and other groups as well. So this is, we're really unified this year. I'll tell you, COVID's been awful, but it definitely unified us. And boy, Zoom has really brought us together as it has just now. What other groups would anybody like to share that they belong to? We cover it all?
So I'll share. So I'm part of the new generation that's trying to take the torch. And so I have like young children, like my youngest is like 8. So there I operate a lot in the DOE space. So there's a lot of different groups within the younger space. So aside from like the DD councils borough-wide, there are councils within the DOE. So there is a citywide council for special education. They meet monthly, and they are a check and balance system to the special education office at DOE, and they do take public comment, and the heads of the special education office are there monthly. So that's a great space. The acronym is CCSE. I try not to do acronyms because they're super confusing. There's a District 75 council. There are president's councils for every district that has a PTA. So we have 6 districts in the Bronx. Each one has their own small council of support. There are a lot of different advocacy spaces. So there's a great group called PIST, which is Parents to Improve School Transportation, Student Transportation. And that's a really great one for people who have busing issues. We're creating a group called Bronx Organized Parents, just a bunch of parents that are really tired of being tired. and so trying to organize around inequities in the system, but also empowering parents to, as you guys said, understanding the power in those other spaces, right? Advocating at the city, getting to know your city council person on a first name basis on speed dial, you know, talking to the education chairs of the assembly and the Senate, and going to the panel for educational policy, which is the school board for the city of New York. You know, there are a lot of amazing spaces that parents have options to be in, and we just need to be informed. And all of these are a Google search away. And these are public meetings. Everybody can go. They give you the link and the agenda and everything. I encourage people to go to these spaces. And for our older students, we have our community boards and we have our precinct councils. And we can absolutely advocate for what we feel we're not getting, because we pay taxes and that means something. And take that power with you and speak about your dollars. And every one person represents 100 voters. I don't know whose math that is, but I go with it. And it really does not, it really does. They care. So when you say I represent, they listen. So do that more, because we're out there doing it and your voice matters. And they want you to feel small, but you're not.
Thanks, Rima. And Wendy's putting some of those links in the chat. Thank you so much, Wendy. And I want to say that to legislators, their constituents who can vote for them or not are very, very important. And that's really a powerful place to come from. Are there any other groups we're forgetting, or should we move on to the next question?
I can mention a few that I'm in. I think I'm involved in them so long, I don't even know what the acronyms mean, but New York, I really don't. Well, Dawny, Arc of New York, or, yeah, I think it's arc .org, and they're throughout the United States for advocacy, and of course New York City Fair, SOS, New York City Alliance, right? So those are some of the ones that I know I get emails from, and they've been helpful to me throughout the years.
Great. And yeah, so Dawny is a Western New York organization, but they put out good information. So it doesn't even matter that it's not local, just to be connected, to make sure that you're up on everything. However, Dawny shares with, you know, there are members of SOS and we're all kind of together. So if you belong to one or two groups, you probably will get all the information. And we highly recommend that, I guess you can tell. Okay. How about the next question? What advice would you give to parents who are new to advocacy? Anyone?
I'll jump in. This one I might read, because the first thing is easy. It's a journey. It's going to be difficult. So I know you said, Rima, that you're tired. Get used to it. I'm sorry to say, it's the reality. I've been doing this for over 40 years. And not that I thought I'd ever sit back and do nothing, but I didn't think it would be this difficult. As Winnie said before about EI, I mean, at one time when my son was a little kid, getting EI was easy because all of the agencies did it. Well, as I always say, not-for-profit doesn't mean losing your shirt, and they all were losing their shirt and they all dropped out. So, you know, you got to be persistent, but be polite. Chris Traber said it much earlier. When you go to a meeting and somebody at DOE is telling you your child should be in this and you don't agree, don't slam your hand down, don't get nasty, be persistent. Don't sign that piece of paper, but you gotta be polite. You gotta remember that the education system and government in general, at least to me, they don't really want to pay for it. So you're right, Rima, we pay taxes, but unless you have a child with disabilities, you don't want your money going for that. You want it to go to something else. And that's an unfortunate consequence of the reality of life. And they're going to push you towards the least expensive way of doing it. They don't really want to spend more money than they have to. But again, advocating and asking for help is a sign of strength. It's not a weakness. And you need to network and you need to get involved, you know, as soon as you can, and keep doing it for the rest of your life, because it looks like that's what we'll all be doing.
So, and nobody knows our kids the way we do, right? We know them better than any professional, no matter what they come off as. And the other thing I wanted to just say is, come on, you have to admit once in a while it's fun to advocate, especially when we're all together. So
we haven't been together physically in so long. You know,
I know.
we need to do it in person, because that's the best way to network.
else has advice for new parents?
Yeah.
I do. I think your first step is to join your local council. When you join the council, you will get information. Like Michael said, you will network and attend their monthly meetings, right? And especially now that we're doing virtual, young parents could do it, at home while their kids are getting services, their EI kids are getting services and what have you, and visit their websites. On the websites are tremendous amounts of resources, and all these organizations that we named earlier are on our websites. I know the Staten Island Council's website has all that information. And I think young parents should find a mentor. At these meetings, find a mentor, find another parent who has been there, and get information from them as well. I think a mentor is very important. My mentors have helped me along the way. So that's the advice I give parents starting out.
Great, thank you.
And it could be very overwhelming, extremely overwhelming, and there is lots of information. I love the idea of a mentor. I've had many, continue to have many mentors in my life that help. I think going back to the councils, it could be overwhelming, but each council also has different committees that might be helpful as well. So I was the parent co-chair of the Children's Services Committee for many years. Now that my child is no longer, in school, I'm kind of moving on as well to kind of, finish with education. And we combined education with family support services. So now those two committees came together. So you have your children's and your family support working together. And hooking up with someone in the committee is really important. And one other thing is patience. All I could say is please, 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 please be patient. Don't get discouraged. Don't give up. It is a journey. It's a long journey, but asking for help along the way makes it easier.
Thanks, Edie. Any other last bits of advice before we jump into some questions?
I'd like to, so I'd like to thank everybody, right? Because some of you have been mentors for me, and I appreciate my DD Council. That's what started my official advocacy. It was more of being a parent and my child, and then going to one of the family support conferences. Probably literally changed my life, right? And the trajectory of what I would be as an advocate versus what I was at that time. And I think that it's really important to make yourself go to things and make the sacrifice, because our kids take a lot out of us, and it's hard to have anything left. The little you have left, get up and do something, because it's gonna help you later. It's easy to fall into almost a sustained state of depression, and where you are not doing anything but not drowning, and you have to go to a conference, sit there all day, be out of your comfort zone, because none of this is comfortable. But you will meet allies along the way, and you will meet people and learn things that change you, and those changes are what makes this livable, possible, tolerable, acceptable. And then you become good at it, and then it becomes a little bit fun. And yeah, we do have fun when we're advocating, and the legislators are having feelings, and you can tell when you walk in that they have a feeling, and that's your power as a parent. And so I encourage everybody to if you don't have it, find it, because it's there.
Thanks, Rima. And you reminded me that I want to say that legislators are, by and large, good, caring people who don't know anything about our problems, so they really rely on us to tell them. And it really is fun. It takes a long time to get success. You have to be patient, like Edie was saying. But when we do, oh my goodness, it's the best feeling ever. And just supporting each other through it all is a really important thing. So
I'm sorry, Winnie. Sorry for the interruption. Just a quick reminder that you guys have about 10 minutes before you start taking questions. So to everybody who have any questions, you can start putting it in the Zoom box with the question and answer section. And you guys have about 10 more minutes, okay?
Yeah, so please put your questions in the Q&A. I've got it open and I'm ready to pose them to our panel.
Can I?
I do have,
Sorry.
I have two comments I would like to make, if you don't mind, Winnie. One is, if you, I feel like if you have an opportunity to meet with a politician, like give examples when you have that opportunity, you know, like,
Tell your
you know,
story.
tell your story. And not only that, you cannot, and bring a photo of your child. I think that's important too. Tell your story, bring a photo, and talk about your friends' issues as well. You know, like I know of a family, the parents are 90 years old, the 70-year-old disabled individual is in a group home. Is in a nursing home now, because there is no opportunity for them. You know, put yourself in their shoes. How would you like that? Or tell them what a backfill is. And when the state tells us, you know, we have, 3,000 openings, that they're really backfills and stuff like that. Like give examples. I think that's important. I think throughout the years, as we're advocating, we use these acronyms and we all understand what we're talking about in our own language, but they don't. So like really just tell them like it is and use examples. And one other thing I do want to bring up is that don't forget to follow through, right? When advocating, at the end of the day, follow through. When our groups tell you to please write a letter or fax or make a call or do the one click, let's do it, you know?
Mhm.
You know, so that's really important.
Really good, thank you. So
Can I add
Yeah,
one?
you
quick-
can.
Real quick. I wanted to say that Rima, being, I believe, no offense to the other ladies, I believe is the only parent on this panel with a young child. For those of you that are watching this that have young children like her, not that we shouldn't be involved as we get older, but we need more young parents, because as I believe Edie said earlier, the passing of the torch. I mean, I worked in the Willowbrook State School, so I can tell you the worst, which I won't get into because that it might get dark before then. But the reality is that, you know, my generation picked it up from them, and we need the Rimas that are watching this who have the young children to get up and get involved, because we're not going to be here forever and nobody is. And that is when you said that, Rima, I just, you know, I almost cried thinking about it, because it's just so important that you need to get involved, please.
Thank you, Michael. So somebody asked in the chat, they said that paras are paid so poorly that there's a lot of turnover, and will there be any opportunity to raise those salaries? So I want to say that due to really fierce advocacy, we got an 11% increase for our schools. Now there's all kinds of other issues associated with that we're still advocating for, but hopefully that 11% will go toward raising paras and teachers' salaries so that we don't have as big a problem. And we're working also on salaries. Our big push for OPWDD issues this year is to increase salaries for direct care workers, including DSPs. And we're all about to work on that, and please join us in doing all that. Now, let me see what else we've got here. Somebody has asked, are New York parents fighting to allow parents as paid caretakers for people age 18 and under? That California allows it for CDPAP and OPWDD respite, et cetera. So I'm not that well versed on this issue. I know that there was some talk about it last year, and I am now going to look into that because I know there's a problem in New York that way. Does anybody on the panel know something about that? Have you been involved? Okay, I'm writing it down now, and I promise that I will look into that one. Okay. Are there any other questions? Here's one. As a professional studying to be school counselor, what can I tell parents who want to be more involved in advocating for their child or children, and who do I refer them to? Somebody who's trained to be a school counselor.
Well, I think they could be referred to the school itself, as Rima was saying, there's lots of resources within the school system, District 75 and local community schools. But again, I think it's important to really get people involved in their communities, in the local DD councils. New York City Fair is an excellent resource. Lots of information on the websites. You know, I think that the family support guide, I know the Bronx Family Support Guide is up on our website that has a list, and we do a lot of work on an annual basis to give you a list of all providers in the Bronx that provide services from, you know, school age to adults. And that resource is available. So I definitely would refer families to these websites to find out more information.
I agree with you, Edie. The Family Support Advisory Council for each borough is a good place to start. And in Staten Island, we have a brochure as well that's updated yearly, and the link is on our website as well.
Great.
And I have to say, I've been involved for so long, and it's really very, very sad to see we had such robust service system in the Bronx. And it was mentioned before with EI that many providers closed the doors and no longer provide not only EI services, but lots of other services. And, you know, it's frightening, again, to see what the guide was, because I've been involved in the DD councils, you know, for 30 years, to see what that guide was. Again, because of all those families that fought so hard to build the service system, to see what it is today, it's really frightening for me. And I say it to whoever can listen, really, we need more people to get involved, and we need the younger families to get involved and stay involved.
Absolutely. We have a staffing crisis that's killing our entire service system from top to bottom, and we have to do something about it. And the louder and more unified we are, the more successful we'll be. So please do join us. The next question is, what is the best way to advocate to get a paraprofessional one-to-one for my child in a 12 to 1-to-1 class? What criteria does the DOE use to approve a para one-to-one? And I don't know the answer to that. Rima, do you, or somebody else?
So my experience is your best, I'm not well-versed in DOE stuff, but to apply for a crisis para or a health para. So if they have a seizure disorder, they'll give it to you, behavior crisis para. So perhaps that would be helpful.
Thanks.
The only thing I would add to that, although one-to-one can be good, our son had one very early on. You also have to realize that the longer they have one, when they get older, when they get out of the school system, you're not going to get a one-to-one in the adult service world. It's almost impossible. And unless you do self-determination, then you still might not. So it certainly can be helpful when it's necessary. I'm not saying you shouldn't get it, but don't, you have to realize you may not get it when your now child becomes a young adult.
Yeah.
Right. So I had a one-to-one para for my son, and it was a result of a crisis situation. And it seemed that it was only due to a crisis did I get any kind of support from when he was in the DOE system. And to Michael's point, that once they took away that one-to-one para, once he went into middle school, then he had even a bigger crisis. And actually, he was deferred to a non-public school placement because they could not support his needs. And unfortunately, it took that crisis, and it was a pretty severe crisis for that to happen. And it's unfortunate. But that's been my experience. Again, that was a long time ago. I don't know if Rima could kind of speak to more what's happening today with the process of obtaining that one-to-one.
And also I want to jump in and say that IAC's expert on children's services just sent me a note, and that's Chris Treber. He said health and safety para, to get that, parents need documentation to justify the request. You need evaluations, behavioral supports, doctor's letters in order to get that. So Rima, anything to add there?
Absolutely. The process for a para is very strenuous, and there are the different kinds of paras. And you also have to remember that sometimes, for example, on a bus, like your kid can't get on the bus without the para. So it is helpful in some situations. You want to make sure that the school is doing what they're supposed to do to ensure that they're getting that support before you go to that next level. Sometimes it's not a para. Sometimes the mandates are not being met on the IEP. So if you're not giving the child counseling because they don't have a counselor and they're having some behavioral or emotional issues, you really can't expect them to improve without getting the mandate. So you want to examine every part of it. And then, yes, you want to keep up to date on your doctor stuff. You don't want to miss visits. You want to make sure you have all your documents and copies of your documents, because that is the biggest thing that I find that delays parents from getting support for their student. I have to go to the doctor. I needed an updated medical. I need a new psychosocial. I need a new psychological. It's great to binder these things, and then when one expires or it's coming up, you do the next one, and you schedule your appointments that year in advance so that you are already done, because it's really hard then when you're in September and your kid needs a para and you can't get a doctor's appointment or a physical. And so now your kid stays struggling because they don't have the documentation they need to justify supporting them further. Everything is about justification and money. So they need that note to say that you need this code to give your kid the money to support the staff they need to succeed. So it stinks a little that we live in a system where everything is systems, but if we stay moving with the system, we don't get caught up, right? You don't get that jam. So keep on top of your stuff, and on top of your school. Ask questions, demand things. I saw that question about the charter school. They have to give you your stuff too. The special education regulations are state ed. That is not a city thing. They can't change it from school to school. That is state ed, and they all follow state ed rules.
I have a few questions.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to touch on what Rima said because it's important. And I learned this very early on from the best advocate I've ever known, like professional advocate, and that's Chris Treba. He told me when I was having all these struggles, even from preschool special education, make a binder and keep every single document that you were ever given and put a picture of your child on that binder so that when you're going into the school, they could see your child and they're not just looking at the documents and reading the evaluations. They could put a face, right, to that report. That is so important. And a lot of times they were scared when I walked in and I didn't have my advocate with me. I walked in myself. I had my binder with me and they thought that I was, a professional and not the parent there. So that definitely makes a difference. I've had every evaluation since my son was 2 years old. I have 3 binders now, and I still keep hard copies. I do have my hard copies of those binders. It is really, really important. So thanks for bringing that up, Rima.
Okay, I have a question. My child is placed in an 8-to-1 ratio by the school IEP team, and they refuse to place him back on a 12-to-1 least restrictive placement. Do I need due process to make school change their mind because it's so hard?
I'll take it. The easy answer is no. A move to a least restrictive environment is not something you need justification for. The law is written that you must provide the least restrictive environment. So there is no negotiation about that. It's only if you want to go more restrictive. So if you were in a 12 and you wanted to be an 8, then you would need documentation and maybe a re-eval and etc. But to go less restrictive, you do not. So you are within your right to demand that they move your child or provide in writing why they cannot, and to please copy the special education office. And I feel like the special education inbox is specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov. Feel free to copy them. Shah is amazing and she helps everybody. Caveat, consider why they don't want to move your kid to a 12. Ask why, because maybe they feel that there are some concerns, or maybe the 12 that they have available is not appropriate. So do ask, because sometimes there is a really good reason, right? Maybe the mix in that class is perfect and the 12 is not. And then maybe you want to make that move in the summer so that if it doesn't work out, it's not high academics, it's not high, a lot of people in school, and you can adjust the IEP back if it doesn't work out. But it does take time to move in reverse. So once you go less restrictive, it will take you time to get that 8 back if it doesn't work out.
So I see a good question in the chat, and it says, what does it mean to, like, what does advocate really mean? Like in day to day, is it about attending a lot of meetings? I have very young children and very limited time.
So since I have young children, I'm going to answer the question because I'm going to be honest. I hear you. I have dragged my kids to more events, meetings, presentations, you name it, block party, mayor's safety town hall, in the PAL on Longwood, packed to the brim, no AC working in August. That people need to see that, but also we need to know our limitations, right? So like, I know my limitations and I ask for accommodations. I need a Google Calendar invite or I'm not showing up because I'm gonna forget. If you don't email or text me, it's not written down somewhere, it's not happening. It didn't even happen. Don't ask me because it's gone, because I have 4 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old, and an 18-year-old. 3 out of 4 have a disability, and the one that doesn't have has a 504. So I get it. I hear you. I used to cry with my kids growing up. And honestly, Edie could tell you, because we had this one event on wherever, Harry Stone over there, and my kids were going to town, and I was trying so hard to just listen to a little bit, right? Just like, if I could just hear a little bit, I'll learn something, and I can use that for I don't know what yet, but I'm gonna use it and keep on bringing them to the community, and A, exposing them to the community, but B, exposing the community to them. Sometimes it's not about what we get out of the presentation, it's about what the community gets out of us being there, because now we force the world to be accepting and accommodating. Awareness is not enough. Tolerance is not enough. You have to accept us and you have to accommodate. You have to. So if I can't hear you, if I can't see you, if I got to walk outside because my kid needs to walk outside 15 times, I have to be able to do that. And that's what it takes for us to be in these spaces. And so I'm lining up for martyrdom all the time and making sure that I'm there showing parents with my 4 kids. And you see it. I'm not like the parent that like, we are so happy and smiling and you're like, how does she do everything? No, you can clearly see I am actively frustrated and wanting to, like, give up. And I don't, because I know it's important for other parents to see that. So as a parent of 4 kids who had 3 toddlers basically at the same time, just do it, whatever you can, even if it's a Zoom meeting, if it's a PTA meeting, at your level, small levels. As they get older, you'll get better at it. It won't get easier, but you will get better at it. And you'll be able to take more, your load, you'll be able to take a bigger load. It's never gonna feel better. It's always gonna stink. Get friends that understand you and you vibe with them, and that helps you get over that feeling of this is not fun. And then it becomes fun.
Oh, that's good advice. So somebody asked a question about busing. Support resources for busing. We still don't have ours in place. Does anybody have anything to say about busing? I know my busing is not in place right now yet. We're still waiting.
Are we talking busing for school age, for adults, public transportation?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So I would like to say, if there's a way that they can email somebody here and then you can connect me with them, I can do that, but I don't have like an advocate email and I get overwhelmed with the emails. But if somebody at ADAPT wants to take those, I just need the name and the OSIS number, and then I can talk to somebody at Office of People Transportation.
Right,
And
that-
the person who asked the question clarify, they're talking about school age.
Yeah. So in my experience, DOT, of course, and I had a problem years ago, and I called 311 and they had a disability person on that line. And they really got back to me and handled my problem before DOT. So you might want to try 311 and, you know, document, email, right? Everything in writing, not just phone calls. Remember what your reference numbers are and what have you. That is always helpful.
So, sad update, about 2 to 3 years ago, they removed our ability to file complaints to 311 on OPT and the DOE. So when you call 311, they route you back to OPT or call 911 if there's an emergency. That's what the recording says.
Yeah.
But call OPT, file your incidents. You can also visit the DOE website. There's a transportation page and you can file a complaint there online. You have to keep your incident numbers and you have to file every time. If it's in the morning and afternoon, file it twice because they're not going to fix it if they don't know that it's happening.
Great, thank you. Somebody also wants to know about transportation for day programs. And this depends on the day program, doesn't it? Yeah. Does any parent want to handle that one?
So what's the question?
I think it's that, yeah, it's, would the questioner please give a little more information there? But I will say, while we're waiting for clarification, that there is a terrible shortage of bus drivers. And, you know, my daughter does not have transportation. We drive her and pick her up every day. And it's possible for us, although not easy. And I know it's impossible for some people. And it's a terrible situation right now. There's just such a shortage of drivers and matrons and DSPs and clinicians and everybody under the sun. We are really suffering here. So
Sorry for the interruption again. We have about 2 more questions we could take before we end for the session.
2 at max, I think, because we have about 2 minutes. So, all right. Well, while we're waiting for one last question, is there anything that our parent panel would like to leave with our viewers?
I'll just say what all of us have already said. You got to get involved. If you're not involved and you just want to complain, you're never going to get anything done. So advocate everywhere that you can, but you got to get involved.
And again, it's really the most important thing you could do for the life of your child.
And like
And-
we said, it does get fun eventually.
I guess so. I don't know if I agree with that, but you have to have a sense of humor, right? And I'm going to say it again, follow through, right? Follow through with your advocacy. Do those 1 clicks, write those letters, fax, make the phone calls, because we can advocate all we want, but we have to follow through with getting our message across. So I think that's really, really important.
So there are parent advocate groups on Zoom. All of those, the DD councils, New York City Fair, they all do Zoom. So join one of those. And I guess we're probably out of time right now. So thank you so much, panelists. I enjoyed being with you today and everybody who asked questions.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for
Thank you.
joining
Thanks
us.
to everybody else. Have a great day.
Thank you.